Woman, empower thyself and listen to The Wet Show. I'm your host, Hattie C. It's a podcast for women, a podcast for men supporting women. Listen as we engage women from all walks of life, share about her business, her experiences, her relationship, her story with you on The Wet Show. Join us in all our social media platforms as we send out live Vox Pops interviews for the segment Streetwise Woman in a community near you. So join the conversation and be the embodiment of empowerment. Okay, so I just want to welcome all to the relaunch of The Wet Show, the Woman Empower Thyself show. Hurricane Melissa made landfall on the shores of St. Elizabeth, leaving 18 dead. Roofs lifted, roads flooded, schools damaged, and lives shattered. But after the winds died down, reality settled in. Who bears the brunt of the burden after the storm? We talk about the infrastructure, we talk about climate change, we talk about rebuilding, but we rarely talk about the invisible weight, the emotional labor, the quiet strength expected from women long after the cameras stop rolling. We know our men are there, but this episode in particular is about resilience. After the storm, the Black River rebirth. We hear from a school principal who lost her house, yet she is still showing up for her students. We hear from voices across St. Elizabeth. We unpack today the psychological impact behind the storm. Terrell Warren Watson, principal of Kilmarnock Primary and Infant, lost her house and currently manages a damaged school. Terrell, we just want to hear from you the human side to the story. When you saw your house, what was your first thought?
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. I know the situation now is not ideal where I'm at, but I'll see how best I can respond.
That's okay.
Yes, it was a frightening experience, and emotionally, mentally, I'm still dealing with what happened. But I had to be moving from room to room. I was moving from night beds and so from room to room to see how best the family could, because I have a granddaughter, grandson, my daughters were there with me as well, to see how best we could navigate through the storm. So we ended up in the garage when I realized that the roof went. So even though the ceiling was still there, when I ended up going to the garage during the eye of the storm. But the morning after, when I went back inside the house and realized that the light and everything went, the ceiling went in most cases, so the place, took in some amount of water and mud that I really don't know where all of that came from. Mm-hmm. As I said to my education officer yesterday, mentally, emotionally, I'm still going through it. And as you've stated, based on my job, I'm expected to report on the damages at the school, parents, students. Most of my staff members were displaced as well. So it has been, still is, a task, even though, persons have been offering, I have to be offering psychosocial support to my staff, and I myself needed the psychosocial support. Mm. So it still is hard, because the tarpaulin is there. It rains now, you have to be sweeping out because still hasn't gotten feedback from the insurance. Still going through it, and I am not sure when. Honestly, I'm not sure when I'll be able to recover.
Okay. Well, I remember us talking and you were saying that, you have your house that is damaged as well as you have to manage a school. How well are you coping with those two issues, school, home, and both are depending on you to come through somewhat? So tell us a little bit about that. How overwhelmed you are, how overwhelmed you may feel. Just delve a little bit.
It's a daily thing. was traversing to work. Let me start there. Okay, you're leaving home without any electricity. Still, well, I had to stay at a family member's house, one of my sister's house. That was late because everything in my house with furniture damage, appliances, and then I have to leave that, and I have to be, traversing to school. Newmarket was blocked, so
Mm-hmm.
you have to take a farm road, off road, to reach the school. So that was another thing again, because Newmarket was covered underwater, so we couldn't travel the road we normally. These have lost their homes as well, books, uniforms. In the meantime, I have to be sourcing things for the students. I have to reopen school under not so good circumstances, but sometimes because they want the children to know that someone is there for them. And even though they're going through what they're going through, but see their friends at school, because what some of them are going back home. But at least when they come to school, they know that they have a meal during the day. So it's not only so I remember the teachers, the students, the parents.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, it has been months, but it's still really hard.
Imagine.
Emotionally, sometimes I want to break down. But I remember at one point somebody said to me, "You're a strong person." And I said to the
Exactly.
person, in this moment, I don't want to be strong. I said, let me go through what I'm going through because I really need to go through it. And because a person's expectations of you too, sometimes it can be really hard knowing that you have to be battling what you're going through mentally, because that is not only emotionally overwhelming, it's also mentally. So
Do you think you have allowed yourself to grieve? Because I think there's a grieving process. Just like when you
I don't,
lose anything at all that you have lost,
well,
there's a grieving process. So there's
I,
stages
I
of
don't think
grief.
honestly, I don't think I have allowed myself to go through that process as yet. I really don't. But there are persons who are depending on you. So even there are times that I've tried, but it's still hard.
So who checks on you, Terrell? Who checks on Terrell the mother, Terrell the principal? Who checks on you? Do you have people
But I
checking
have to
up?
give, yes, I have to give thanks for I have some siblings and I have two good friends. You have support that constant from persons from the regional office, Ministry of Education. You
That's
can
good.
there are persons there that you can call on to talk to. But sometimes, you don't really want to because you still have your expectations of your submissions and all of that, your responsibility as a leader. So I do have siblings who constantly, I have my children, thank God for them, that are there, even though they have been through it. So, they were there. Three of my four children, they were there during the storm. And like I said, my two grandchildren. So they still need the support as well. But we know that we're there for each other.
Okay, Alison, just want to take a little some questions from you as well. I'm sure you can relate to Terrell what happened during the storm. Do you have a particular story that's any different? I think you would, right? In terms of the aftermath.
Yes, well, I really identify when she said that somebody said to her she's such a strong person. And you just, thinking to yourself, are you really that strong? You don't want anybody calling you strong. No, you're just doing what you have to do and hoping to get through the day. And I think sometimes when people say you're resilient, they don't realize that you're just doing what you can to move
You
forward
can.
the best way you can. And sometimes you think you're a complete failure at it, but you're just really pushing forward. I think we were fortunate in this house. I mean, the back of the house went from early, and then the front part went late in the storm. But it's a big house, and we have a big middle that is concrete. And so there were 14 of us. It wasn't just the immediate family. Other family and friends had come here because their houses, we always consider them more vulnerable than this. So The 14 of us pack up in the little passageway. That was the only place that didn't have windows that had, because the windows had started to break. But all in all, in terms of house and having cover, I think we are really much
Yeah.
better off than many. For me, a lot of so the trauma is still here because it's still a lot of us here. Not everybody has a room, but happily, as people, we all like each other. And although we might get on each other's nerves sometimes because there's so much of us in the space, at the end of the day, we really are supporting each other and holding each other's hands. So for me, what really has been difficult is seeing my historic town really in shambles like this. And so much of the things that have gone are not things that we can ever build back. So some of them are a permanent loss. And, there's a struggle now to try and keep even the vestiges of those that are still left so that the town just become an alien place that we don't recognize. So I carry that a lot with me, and I carry a real personal grief over a lot of the places that are no more.
Okay, Dr. Carr, just want to jump in here for a minute. You have heard both sides of the stories in terms of women in the community of St. Elizabeth. As a psychiatrist, and I know that you have a research, we'll get to the research a little later. But how do women cope with the overwhelming burden, the weight that they have to carry, within the community? I don't say men are not there because I remember Fiona saying when I asked her the question, how you think men are different from women in terms of coping with something like Hurricane Melissa. And she said, when men and women jumped in, did their part, you saw women kneeling up door, you saw men doing the same. The only difference was they were lifting. Men probably had to lift the heavier stuff, but women were right along with them helping. But there is the emotional and the overwhelming burden after the fact that when we sit down, there is depression. A friend of myself and Fiona, we know she is depressed basically. She has to be taking tablets for depression. And I know Alison looks strong, and Alison looks like she can, kick anything out of the way. She faces her challenges head on. But I know that deep down, Alison also has been affected. And Terrell as well, because Terrell have two things to manage. We all are going through PTSD basically as females. So I just want you to bring to the fore. You can turn on your camera so that we can see you, and just help us navigate our feelings. First, tell us what's the difference between us and men, because we are not really seeing much of a difference, but we know there is a difference. And just tell us how, as women, we can navigate the responsibility as women.
In terms of men and women coping, while both men and women would experience some amount of distress after a stressful event like a natural disaster, in the Caribbean context, women tend to carry multiple roles, like Terrell or Allison, where they're the principal, they're the partner, they're the friend, the caregiver. And in the Caribbean setting, also, there are a lot of single parent female led households. In terms of how women react, a lot of it has to do also with biology. So, just to give you some statistics, globally, over 581 million women live with a mental disorder. And in comparison to men, where it's 514. So, in general, women tend to suffer from mental illness more frequently, and specific ones more frequently than men. Women are also predisposed to depression. In fact, women are 1.5 times more likely, or it is more likely, 1.5 times more commonly seen in women than men after a natural disaster. When you've lost everything, when you lost a lot of your livelihood, your shelter, your basic needs, because of this predisposition, women would more likely or have a greater chance of falling into a depressive episode and experiencing symptoms of anxiety and PTSD as well. In terms of how they cope, because women are often in the Caribbean, again in the Caribbean context, are often holding so many roles, it can become quite challenging. So it's really about taking taking a step in, like Alistair said, going through the experience, recognizing that something is wrong when something is wrong, not putting on a front and pushing through regardless. Take time to just get back to yourself, take time to just relax, even in the midst of a disaster.
Yeah.
Because women also tend to be more caring and nurturing in general. Not to say that men aren't nurturing as well, but women tend to be more caring and nurturing. In a setting like this, women would probably feel a greater need to care for persons who are affected in comparison to men. And it was seen where they were standing right beside men, the men rebuilding, carrying the load, also taking care of the home if a home still existed after. And in terms of finding and making those provisions to like feed their children or taking care of the elderly, women more likely would do that. And with that being impaired, especially for a lot of women, their livelihood in St. Elizabeth, I know most times the farmers are men, but women do help. And in terms of like selling the goods, and some women, there are lots of female farmers as well. So a loss of livelihood as well, the inability to take care of the family, that can be a lot. So there are resources after a natural disaster like this. I know that they have been sending down teams to do psychological first aid, what we call psychological first aid. Not sure how many persons have accessed it thus far, but that is one means. Also, there are grounding techniques, meditation, if possible, persons. Even just helping to rebuild can be therapeutic for some persons, though hard work, still therapeutic.
There are actually more women that have mental illnesses and suffer from PTSD than men. And you kind of wonder because we're in it together and we're supposed to be, helping each other. I don't think it's not that we're not helping each other. I think it's just how we process things as females, and going forward. So, people like Terrell have two things balancing. She has her school, she has most women who are working women have their work. Plus, you have to go home to the whole debris in the house, that sort of a thing. No, yes,
Or,
so it is very difficult. I'm wondering,
or
yes,
some like me, I'm saying some with me and many women and others in Black River. Actually, the hurricane made us lose our livelihood. And that's something I think people forget sometimes. That they might look at you and say, "Oh, but your house look like it's all right," and they're not thinking, well, maybe the house might look like it's all right. It might not be as all right as you think, because my house, a lot of the damage you can't see it when you just drive in the yard. You don't know that I'm not in my bedroom and that there are empty rafters back there. But even if the house was fine, you stop to think that some people didn't don't
yeah.
have work anymore, and that's something that I mean, that was my reality, and you still have to try be, keep your nerve and keep your composure, because there are people who are depending on you to be there for them, and it's not necessarily just members of your own household either, so that's
On to tell us about how these our coastal areas, how the fisher folk, the persons who make the crafts for the tourists when they come in, you have your little business there whereby tourists come, whether it's a local tourist or, from abroad. And I just want to find out, how has this been affecting your business?
well, just to give some background, I actually left my teaching job in August of 2024 to pursue my heritage tours full time. And so you can imagine that Hurricane Melissa coming and mashing up so many of the
Yeah.
heritage sites has been made a very devastating impact on this tour that I was in, just in the process of really trying to build up. So, I mean, even if it wasn't a heritage tour, the fact that the hurricane hit the main street, hit Black River so badly, and it basically mashed up everything on the main street, the buildings, especially on the seaside. It just means that, I mean, tourists just weren't coming. They might be coming back a little at a time now, but even for the tour, people are thinking, well, what is she going to show them? No, I have started back, but it's slow. But this whole thing has really it has forced you to just kind of wheel and come again and see if you can make something out
What is
of
left? What is
what you
left?
never imagined you would
Yes.
have to make something out of.
Yes, so I was saying that I remember something in his research, and I'm trying to draw up on this research, saying it affected coastal areas, Caribbean nations, especially who have hurricanes and that sort of a thing. It affects those industries, and it is ever so hard to rebuild, because sometimes I keep thinking,
Yes,
will it happen again? Should I even be living here? Sort of a thing. So I was just want to get from you. You said that you are now rebuilding your business. Just give us a little
yes,
idea as to from start to finish. The feelings that you were having before and overcoming those feelings to reach to where you are now, where you're re-establishing or relaunching your business as a female entrepreneur.
well, the thing is, and I think this would be the same for so many people who have a small business that basically you are nearly everything to that business. The business is more to you than a business. Is not just something that you finish with and then you go lie down at home and it's done for the day. It's always with you. You put your heart and your soul and your brain and your strength into this thing. And then something comes along that is not within your control. I mean, you would never have imagined. And you are just really left reeling. And on top of that, you have to think about conditions at home and friends and family who also need your support and
Mm-hmm.
need your help. So, honestly, for me, I kind of just jumped immediately into trying to be the champion for the heritage sites in Black River. Um, and so, yes, so in hindsight, I wonder if it was such a wise thing for my own personal well-being and sanity, but it was just something I saw as crucial for the town, in that you don't want to lose the sense of who you are just because somebody might not have the imagination to or the patience to say just hold on a little before I hit something down that can be replaced. So I really jumped into that very quickly, and I tried to console myself with the fact that okay, I'm jumping into stuff for the town, but at the end of the day, it will also benefit my business because I had to keep justifying you're not spending any time on your business, you're not pushing yourself forward, you're up and down. I look about church, I look about this, I look about that, and trying to get, you know, just get people to see beyond the obvious. And it caught up with me, I would say end of December, early January. I couldn't talk to another soul about anything to do with hurricane, anything to do with Black River heritage and history, anything. I just needed to really be left alone for a while to just calm my brain and start thinking, I have no income. I need an income. How am I going to do this? And when I took that space and I took 10 days where I just blocked everybody. That's it. That's what I did. I blocked nearly everybody except my immediate family from being able to call me. And I stopped answering numbers that I didn't recognize because I needed the space to think about myself and for myself. And I had started having some thoughts about how the business could move forward. And just so your listeners understand, what I had was a walking
Mm-hmm.
historical tour of Black River, where we would start at the parish church, and everybody has seen the picture of that now with just the tower and little bits and pieces standing. We would start there, we would walk around the town, and I would tell the history of Black River along town's main street. I would play the organ for people at the historic organ at the parish church, which is now in like 1,000 pieces. Yes. And sometimes we would get in their cars and go to other places. So other places within Black River, because not everything was in walking distance. So I started thinking to myself, well, there were some cases in which I would offer a walk and drive tour where suppose the people could come at a time of day that was too hot to walk, or suppose it was too big a group to really maneuver in the streets. What I would say to them is, all right, you come and I'll, take you around the church, and then you will just jump in your car and go to specific spots and come. And sometimes that would work too because you had some people who weren't so mobile. So I thought to myself, well, that has worked okay. It's not my preferred mode of doing it, but it has worked fine, and people have enjoyed it when I have to do it that way. So I thought, well, this is going to have to be the way that we move forward because the streets are just too rough. There's just too much things that people could get hurt or trip on or so on. This is the way I wanted to do it, and also I no longer wanted to start at the church because I wanted people to be able to see Black River beyond the hurricane. Because that's very important to me that Black River be represented total history and not just Melissa, because a lot of people were just seeing Black River as destroyed. So I didn't want to start in the middle of the destruction anymore. And plus, logistically, no bathroom there working for anybody to use when people come from far and all of that. So I decided that I would really have to start from my house.
Ask you a question though, Alison. You think that working is therapeutic
Yeah.
for you? Because sometimes, when things go bad as females, we push into the work, trying to forget. Do you think this actually helps? Is it therapeutic for you?
I think it would depend on the level. Certainly, sitting and doing nothing in a situation like this for me would not have worked at all. So, yes, I think jumping into the whole trying to get people to understand about the heritage of Black River and its importance, and then for me, trying to get the tour relaunched. Yes, certainly that was something I needed to do, but I think you can kind of overdo it and overwhelm yourself, especially when you're trying to balance too much. When you have the trauma at home, in my case, the trauma of no longer having an income. In the case of your other guest who is on, she has the trauma of both having the work that she has and having home to deal with. So it's you need to do something, but you need to be very self-aware of when you reach your limit. And I think for a while I really wasn't, and that impacted my ability to cope. So I'm trying to be more careful now with
But what I
myself.
noticed though, Alison, is that sometimes when things happen to us, you have to take what I said, take make fashion, turn your hand make fashion, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I heard that coming out. And it's very crucial for our businesses as females that we have to be very innovative. If
Mm.
something goes wrong, sometimes it is an opportunity going forward to change things. And this change can sometimes be the best thing that has ever happened to the business.
No, that is really true. And I mean, the new format for me and starting my tour in a new place has given me the opportunity to share some things about Black River that the old format didn't really lend itself to exploring. There was just so much in the center of the town that you would focus on and tell that story, that some of the story of maybe wider Black River. There just wasn't enough time because when you're doing these tours with people, you can't have the people for 5 hours. You try to finish it by about 2. And now that I'm starting in a new location, a little part of it has become a little more interactive, and we're exploring now different parts of the town that I would necessarily have highlighted. And those parts do have an interesting story as well. So for me, I can now I mean, I used to invite people back all the time because there's so many stories of Black people. I tell them if you come a second time, you like it to hear other things. But I can definitely now say to them, no, it's going to be very different. You will hear some of the things will be the same, but it will be in a different context, and you're going to hear some things that you have definitely not heard before because we just didn't explore there before. So the turn your hand make fashion, as you say, it can really lead you in other directions, you know. And now that we're mostly driving to, I can start the tour
Mhm.
a little later, which is more convenient for people because I used to insist that they try come here by 8:30 before the Nakiba sun melts them. So now that we are both walking and driving more, they can come a little more
Right.
relaxed and we jump back into gear. Most people will come with AC vehicles. Yes. Yeah, it's not so much me angst, you know. I can take the heat, but it's when you have the visitors and because they're late and it's
That's
getting hot.
true.
So it's opened up. It's opened up new ways of
Right.
doing things and it certainly forces you to
Right.
think different.
What are some of the policies put in place based on the differences? Women carry the brunt of the burden most of the times. Are there policies put in place where these natural disasters happen in the Caribbean and the women having to, basically juggle? Are there policies in place that you can tell us about how to, solutions to the problem, recommendations, that sort of a thing?
Well, in terms of policies, in terms of resources, some of the resources that women might require might be a bit different. For example, some of the physical items that a woman might need, especially a woman who is still menstruating, they might need tampons and stuff like that that men might not meet. So in terms of providing resources and donations to the area, from what I do know, they do try to focus on getting items that women specifically would need, but not necessarily that there is a policy for that to be done. It's just based on what we or what persons would anticipate that will be needed. In terms of therapy, the therapy is also offered to both men and women, though we might find that women tend to subscribe to the therapy more than men because, again, and unfortunately, in Jamaica, men tend to have poorer health seeking behavior than women. So, even in terms of the counseling services that are being offered in the post Melissa areas or the areas that were significantly affected by Melissa, you tend to find that more women are accessing some of the psychological support services. Men tend to more want physical resources like building blocks. Women too as well to build back their houses that were damaged or just material in general and food. In terms of the food though, because again there are a lot of single parent female headed households, we also find that a lot of women are coming to seek food not just for themselves but also for their children and rest of their family. Men tend to be more lazier, they tend to be more laid back because again, I guess they would just presume that the women would go and get the food and prepare the meals at home, etc. Because even though we are a more modernized society now, there are still some amount of female preference in terms of doing certain tasks, unfortunately as well. But again, another reason, well, I should say another reason that what more women might also seek the psychological outside of the health seeking behavior. As I was saying earlier, women tend to be disproportionately affected in terms of mental health. One of it is hormonal in terms of estrogen levels. Another part of it is just based on how women tend to be in general in terms of the caring and more nurturing. When you care a lot, you tend to hurt a lot more when something goes wrong because you also recognize how much effort you would have put into building something. And because again also women have more responsibilities, they tend to feel the brunt of not being able to fulfill those responsibilities as well. Women tend to be have a higher rate of depression than men worldwide, and this is no different for Jamaica. In terms of the suicide rate, well, suicide attempt rate. So Jamaica is kind of tricky with this. So there's a higher rate of suicide in men, but there's a higher rate of suicide attempt. So what the, just to I guess to explain that a little bit, more women attempt to end their lives, but more men are successful at doing it. So that will reflect in a higher suicide rate in comparison to women, and that's just because men tend to use more aggressive methods to end their lives, like hanging and or cutting their throats. Women tend to use more like overdosing on tablets and stuff like that, which they have a greater likelihood of not being successful. And also, a lot of the times when women do make an attempt, it's not necessarily because they want to die, but because they just want to feel better. Not that that's not the case for men as
It's
well,
a
to
cry
point
for
out,
help,
but
basically.
it's a cry for help. And women, again, because men have poor self health seeking behavior, and because of how sometimes society portrays men of having to be strong, they are also less likely to go and seek support than women. And when they get to the point when they do want to end their lives, it's at a critical point in comparison to women that might go in earlier when it is slightly less severe. So, with all of that being said, in terms of resources, yes, it's offered to both men and women, but in terms of psychological support, women tend to utilize it more because of health seeking behavior and because, in general, more women tend to be affected by the psychological distress as well.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I read your paper, and one of the things that came up was the Hiago framework. Am I calling that properly? Hiago framework. Yes, whereby it tells you about the integration of gender perspective in all disaster risk management policies. That mean the inclusion of females specifically, how they read. So can you expand a little bit on that for us, please?
So it's basically it's a framework that that says that while both men and women do go through things in terms of responding to a disaster, for example, because women again are disproportionately affected, we need to have a gendered lens in terms of how we target it. And it's just in terms of targeting things that women would need, like providing tampons, for example, or having facilities for women to watch themselves to better meet their hygienic needs, stuff like that. When you are making relief efforts for women.
As a psychiatrist now, what is the solution dealing with women who have mental health issues or just simple depression for something like Melissa or anything else that may be coming up? How do we deal with it? How do we balance the odds, basically? Delve a little bit into that.
Well, in terms of balancing the odds, so first, I just point to out, like in recent times since COVID, there has been a drastic increase in the amount of persons coming in for mental health disorders, mostly being women. With Melissa added on top of that, the numbers have skyrocketed even more. In terms of even the emergency room, when I work in the emergency room, I see every every single day there is at least one to two new persons coming into hospital for mental health problem. Just last week, for example, Bellevue was packed to capacity. They had to be referring persons out, especially because of their social media promotion. All of that's a lot more persons are going to Bellevue that previously carried a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Or it still carries a stigma for some persons, but not as much with the whole marketing campaign. It's kind of aimed at breaking barriers and breaking stigma and encouraging persons. Still yet, though, the majority of persons coming in to seek mental health services are still women. The reason you might see a lot more men at Bellevue, you might see more men at Bellevue is because men tend to have more psychotic disorders than women. In our context, some of it is drug induced, cannabis being the main drug, but in more recent times, there have been also Molly induced psychosis as well as alcohol. Well, alcohol induced psychosis has been a thing from before. And a lot of men use alcohol as well, outside of psychosis, and women as a coping mechanism when they're depressed. In terms of balancing out the odds, I would say this in this particular aspect, men it more so needs to be targeted at men in terms of increasing their health seeking behavior. And also we can market it, I guess, in a way to say that men get your health together so that you can help to support the women in your lives to help to build them up. Because a lot of times we see that women are the ones in the emergency room supporting the men at their bedside when the men do come in. But a lot when the women come in, we might see a mother there, a sister there. So there's also Also, in general, just a general observation that the men aren't as supportive to the women when the women are in mental health crises. But when the odds are flipped, you usually see the women at the bedside. You see the woman there. Just the other day, I saw someone, her partner had a psychotic break, and she was at the bedside feeding him same way. And on the other hand, there was another case where a wife, she had a psychotic break, and the husband refused to come into hospital. He would just come to see. Equally, recognizing that for each individual, whether it be a male or female, there has to be a somewhat customized treatment for each person based on their individual situation. The shared trauma in this instance would be the hurricane, but the impact on each individual and how each individual is affected and how they respond to the trauma would be different. So the approach that we took was to treat the person based on how they were affected, how are the degree to where how they were affected, and how they would respond, and helping them to develop coping strategies and coping mechanisms. Now, some of them are somewhat generalized things that like we would more likely do and would recommend for women, like say gardening or art or painting as a form of cognitive behavior therapy might not be as effective for men. So for men, we would more so encourage, like if they like to play sports, to continue to play football, gather social support, talk to your friend group. Well, talking to your friend group is something that we recommend to both men and women. Just that women tend to be more open with their friends than men about certain
Okay.
personal things. Though you would be surprised how open men are when they discuss each other about. I wouldn't say that we took a gendered approach. I would say we did equity and customized treatment based on the
Okay.
individual struggle. For example, Tara was saying that she was the principal. She had to be the provider, the shoulder for men, for her the persons in her life, to cry on, and they were saying that she was strong, and she said she doesn't want to be strong. It's in that case, or in that instance, we would probably for her recommend rest and relaxation, depending on how she was assessed, and based on the symptomatology, we could complement it with medical treatment as well. But again, if it was a male with the same presentation, it would be the same process. It's just that the social aspect of it, because we do use a biopsychosocial model when treating persons, the social aspect of it would be slightly different based on the
Okay.
individual. The psychological aspect would also be different too, because different persons, before even Melissa, had different traumas. So if persons had trauma before Melissa just was an additional trauma on the already existing trauma that they would have had. And that is something that even will be reflected in how persons respond, because some persons, it's basically like when your cup is now overfull. It's overflowing now because it's filled to capacity. You had trauma already, and Melissa was the last part. I would say is the straw
Okay.
that broke the camel's back.
All right. Just want to end this segment with, it is indeed very good to know what to do after Melissa when persons are now, so we're still falling apart. We're still shattered because when you look up, you see no roof. You just see tarpaulin. Many persons haven't gotten their lives back together and that sort of a thing. So it's good to know how do we move forward. The awareness of mental health, the awareness that depression is not should not be stigmatized, sort of a thing, or even if you're a little bit mad, it shouldn't be stigmatized. Encouraging people to go to whatever health centers there are to seek, help for your whatever trigger responses that you're having. So those would be the solutions or the recommendations. Then just summing up for you, Dr. Carr.
Yeah, those would be the recommendations. Go to your nearest health center if it's still standing. Services are being provided. There are also hotlines provided by the Ministry of Health. If, for example, you feel like you are going to hurt yourself, you can call the hotlines. Most of them are open 24 hours. Lean on your social support, lean on your friend groups. If it is that you're a religious person, lean on your church group. A lot of the pastors, or some of the pastors, have been trained in terms
Mm-hmm.
of basic counseling. And outside of that, we have also been sending in teams into the severely affected areas to intermittently provide psychological support. So when you do see them, don't feel ashamed. Know that all persons are impacted by mental health challenges at some point in their lives. So don't feel ashamed, don't feel like you're a failure, and just go out and seek help if you need it. Access the available resources.
Okay, thanks so much. So, on a lighter note, we just want to crown a woman whose story did not begin with her. It began in the 1820s when an enslaved woman named Arabella earned her freedom and did something radical. Do you want to take up on that, Miss Morris? Arabella, tell us a little bit about Arabella. Story time. Let us begin the journey or the tour with Arabella.
Okay, that's me. So my family history here in Black River goes back a long way, possibly
Okay.
more than the 200 years.
You are saying
Sorry?
200 years ago.
Yes, yeah, and it could be longer, but about 200 is where we can definitively say. So my great 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 grandmother. So that's my grandmother's great grandmother.
It's not too far,
Was
Alison.
an
That's pretty
enslaved
close.
woman. Well, when
Yes.
you put it like that, but so she was an enslaved woman named Arabella Palmer. She was born in 1795, and she gained her freedom before the end of slavery through the will of her owner. So this will actually didn't set her free, but the will gave permission to the executors of the deceased that if Arabella Palmer could manage to find the price you set for her and her, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 children at the time, that she should be allowed to buy herself out of slavery. And she did so. We don't really know what the means were. It could have been through a wealthy slave owning partner. It could have been that she, used to have produce to sell on market days. It could have been a number of different things. But she bought herself out and her children. So my great grandfather, her son, was not yet born. So he was not born into slavery. He was born shortly after his mother gained her freedom. And one of the things that she managed to do was buy a piece of property on what is now High Street, Black River, right in the middle of the town, right in the middle of where it get mashed up really terribly by the storm, but on the other side. So the original building is not still there. That was from the 1820s. So that was a wooden building. Wooden buildings were there. And there is, I mean, things have been rebuilt there now. But that property actually stayed in my family down to my dad's time. And so that's how we know we come to be in Black River. That's the side we have been able to trace. As I say, we think the other side may be the total opposite, but that's just like so many Jamaicans, slave owning as well as enslaved sides, so we're not so sure the other side. And so yes, so our history actually comes from that far in this place, and my connection to the town, its heritage, its historic buildings comes from there, and the fact that my grandmother grew up on that main street in Black River's heyday, the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. My grandmother and I shared a room until I
Okay.
was an adult, really. And so a lot of the anecdotes. So yeah, we lived in the same bedroom until I went to university, until she died actually. And because I was still coming home, and that's the room I would sleep in when I came home from university. So, all of us grew up with her stories, but me sharing the bedroom probably heard them over and over. And I would ask to hear them over and over because some of them just were so entertaining and intriguing.
Can
And
imagine.
she could really tell it well that I could almost feel like
So you
I
think
was
this has
there.
anything to do with why you chose the business that you're now in? This sounds like
Most definitely, because I mean, it's you grew up with these stories of what Black River was like. You grew up with some of the songs that the people used to make up after each other. That I know nobody outside of my family has ever heard some of those songs, and I share them on my tour, but I'm not sharing them here. Some things have to
Come on,
remain for the tour.
you will listen
You
some
can't give away all these
title.
secrets. No, no, I'm not saying I share them on the tour. You'll have to come. You'll have to come and hear But it was just amazing some of the antics that they got up to at that time. I remember she telling me the story of getting the opportunity to go up on one of the ships that would bring things into Black River, that would come for things and bring things, and going up on the ladder that takes you up, and so you have the boat below with the boatmen down below and climbing up, and she's describing how this gust of wind came and lift her frock way up. So all the men could see and how she was so ashamed, or how she exposed, and so all those things really made the history come alive. And then my mother, who was not from Black River, but moved here when she was 18, and looked like she fell in love with both my
Mm-hmm.
father and the town. So she actually collected a lot of Black River
Yeah.
history as well. So she went through a lot of source documents even from the 1800s,
Her name
saved
is
lots of newspaper clippings. Sorry? My mother,
right.
Joyce Francis, Marjorie Joyce Francis, what everybody down here
Okay.
knows her as Joyce. And my dad was Roy Francis. So my dad actually, so both of them were just very historically inclined. And my father did a lot of recording of Black Rivers through his camera, because he was an amateur photographer from he was a teenager, and somebody had given him a little brownie box camera. So he has really documented a lot of Black River right through the ages. So in a way, I guess I couldn't escape having an interest in Black
Sorry.
River. I mean, I didn't ever think, yes, a historical interest and a
Mm.
community interest too. So it's not so strange that I would have ended
Okay.
up doing this.
All right. So thanks so much, Alison, for coming on the Wet Show and telling us a little bit more about your heritage tour.
It's
Way
called the Way Back
Black River
When Black
Heritage.
River Heritage.
So all of us, and you're inviting all of us to come down and see what, even though what is left of Black River may not be as is, but I'm sure Alison will put something together so that that tour will be as interesting or even more interesting than when it was.
Yes. I would say I am actually very proud of of how I have managed to, of what I have managed to put together as a new tour. It really works well. And, you will see more than just the hurricane. You will see the hurricane because, that's what some people want to come and see, all the disaster, but you will learn a lot more about Black River and what it was like and why
Okay.
it's such a great town.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be resilient. We will start new businesses and we will prosper. So, until next time, may we rebuild with wisdom, lead with equality, and never confuse strength with silence. Thanks again, Alison and Kevon. Thank you so much